You've been here before. Bright white lights, the smell of food court pizza, and something you can't quite put your finger on. Escalators that rise but never end. Somewhere, an old song plays in the background. You look around for the people you came with, but everyone's faces are blank, silhouettes moving in the shadows. Every door opens to the same corridor, and even though you've never stepped foot in this place, you know exactly where everything is. If that dream sounds familiar, you're not alone. Thousands of former GATE students say they've all visited the same location, a shared dreamscape they call Mall World. Hello, and welcome back to Wicked Mysterious. I just had to bump this episode up on my topics list because I found it so interesting. So, I had made a TikTok video about Gate that's doing quite well right now, and there's a lot of comments where people were talking about Mall World. So, this is a weird rabbit hole related to Gate that I didn't even know about. So, if you found me from that video, hello, and my name is Danny. And if you're not new here, my name is still Danny. And on this channel, I and sometimes my cat explore all kinds of mysteries from aliens to paranormal stories to unexplained phenomena. If you're interested in this kind of thing, check out my guide to what they don't want you to know about consciousness. It's free and it's in the description box below. I'm also giving away a 30-minute reading by raffle, and you're automatically entered just by downloading that guide. Sign up to be the first to take my conscious creation course and get a discount. Links to all of that are in the description box below. Also, don't forget to take the GATE survey on your GATE experience. So, with all that out of the way, let's get to this weird part of GATE lore. So, like I said, I've been getting comments on TikTok about Mall World in relation to GATE. So, of course, I had to investigate this, but then I got super excited and mildly terrified because I too experienced this. So, if you've been following along, we've already explored the strange overlap between Cold War mind control research and the programs designed for gifted and talented children in the United States, and it seems in other countries as well. So, if you haven't seen these videos, I do have a whole playlist on this GATE deep dive, so check that out. We've looked at government experiments, psychic research, and even the CIA's fascination with remote viewing. But in this episode, we're going somewhere totally different. Not in a lab and not in a classroom, but a dream. We'll step inside the shared landscapes people swear they've seen while asleep, the fluorescent corridors of Mall World. Could this be evidence that human minds, perhaps trained in certain ways, can construct and visit collective spaces that exist somewhere in our consciousness? If you were in GATE, you remember the drills and the testing, timed logic puzzles, pattern blocks, the faint buzz of fluorescent lighting, the praise for focus. You might even remember listening to the Monroe Institute's Gateway Process tapes. You were taught to visualize solutions, to enter flow states, to tune out distraction. Those skills alone sound harmless, except they also mimic conditions researchers use to trigger altered states of consciousness. So, when former GATE students started describing identical dreamscapes, sprawling but empty malls lit like laboratories, it's easy to see why some think those dreams might be residue left over from early childhood conditioning. If exposure to tones and symbols can steer dream content, and if programs like GATE practice mental immersion daily, then maybe Mall World is the result of that residual conditioning after all these years. Of course, mainstream neuroscience would say otherwise. To them, the repetition of mall imagery simply reflects a shared culture, the suburban temples of the late 20th century filled with sound, light, and consumer ritual. Your subconscious uses what it knows. Yet, even skeptics admit that the odd part isn't what people dream, it's how alike those dreams are. I'm going to circle back to this in a bit, but for now, let's talk about what intrigues me most about this strange development. First of all, dream manipulation is a real thing. Not only is this a commonly reported symptom repeated amongst previous GATE students, but it does actually tie directly into the other things we've been talking about and researching, which is MK Ultra and childhood conditioning. In laboratories from Stanford to MIT, researchers have learned to slip messages into dreams using a method called targeted memory reactivation. It sounds simple. You teach a subject a task, like matching images to sounds. Then, while they sleep, you replay those same tones during REM. When they wake, their memory of the task is measurably stronger. It's as if the brain used the dream to rehearse it. Other studies go even further. Northwestern University's lucid dream experiments use gentle flashes of light on the eyelids to tell the sleeper, "You're dreaming right now." I did talk about this in detail in my lucid dreaming episode, which I will link here on YouTube. Once the dreamer recognizes the signal, they can steer the dream, move left, solve a math problem, even answer researchers' questions by signaling with eye movements. This is not science fiction. It's been captured on EEG and on video and studied in great detail. Clinics use similar techniques therapeutically. Veterans with recurring nightmares learn to re-script the story before bed. Imagine the nightmare in the beginning and then choose a new ending. Over weeks, the brain adopts the rewrite. The old loop loses its vibrance and emotional connection. This reminds me a lot of EMDR. So if you do struggle with PTSD, I would highly recommend it. It was life changing for me. So I would strongly suggest you check that out if that's something you struggle with. But anyway, that's dream conditioning in its benign form. So learning, healing, or memory boosting. But once you realize that sound, light, and suggestion can enter your dreams, you can see why people started asking this darker question: who else might have tried this on us? During the Cold War, the US and its allies were obsessed with the idea of influence without awareness, how to change thought or behavior below the threshold of consciousness. I'm not going to go super into detail here on this because we've already talked about it and covered it a lot in detail, but basically, MK Ultra became the umbrella for hundreds of those projects. They included hypnosis, sensory deprivation, psychoactive drugs, subliminal audio, and even sleep teaching. The declassified papers mentioned dreams mostly in passing, but the ultimate goal was still to figure out how to break a mind and control it. When the hearings on MK Ultra ended in the 1970s, officials said that the experiments failed. Yet by the 1980s, the same universities and contractors were publishing research on cognitive enhancement, memory consolidation, and learning during rest. Different wording, but conceptually the same frontier. To the average reader, that's an evolution, but to us in the gate community, it looks like a rebranding. It can't exactly be disproven that the torch was passed from the intelligence world to the education reform, wrapped in the language of giftedness. In fact, the NDEA, which was signed into law into 1958, shows a direct link between national defense and public education. But I digress. Today we're talking about dreams. So, why would we all dream about the same location, a shared liminal place, an empty shopping mall? Let's go back to a thread we've talked a lot about: the gateway tapes. These tapes were created by Robert Monroe of the Monroe Institute. He was a pioneer in consciousness research, and he created these tapes while researching out of body experiences. Not surprisingly, this was investigated by the US military and was proven by a declassified document by the CIA, where the military was tasked with assessing Monroe's gateway process. So, if nothing else, this was certainly on the government's radar. Robert Monroe wasn't a mystic or some crazy hippie. He was a radio executive, an engineer obsessed with sound. In the late 1950s, while experimenting with some specific audio frequencies designed to influence brain waves, Monroe stumbled onto something totally unexpected. Participants listening to the synchronized tones began reporting sensations of leaving their bodies. They said they could float above the room, drift through walls, and observe scenes from impossible angles. Monroe called these experiences out of body states. And to study them, he founded the Monroe Institute in Virginia. Through years of controlled experiments, Monroe built a model of consciousness he labeled by focus levels. Focus 10, for example, was the mind awake, the body asleep, and focus 21 was the edge of physical reality. And beyond those levels, way beyond, was focus 27, which he called the park. Monroe described the park as a luminous open world that existed on the non-physical plane, a meeting ground for travelers. It looked a little like an idealized version of Earth: rolling hills, trees, water, and buildings that seemed to respond to thought. He said it was populated by guides, beings who helped souls transition, learn, or rest between incarnations. Students at the Monroe Institute still train to reach Focus 27 using what the organization calls hemisync audio technology. They report visiting the same park, meeting familiar figures, and receiving instruction. For decades, participants who'd never met each other ever in life had drawn eerily similar landscapes. Whether you see the park as a metaphor or a metaphysical reality, it's a place that behaves as if it's shared. That alone makes it relevant to gate researchers who suspect certain types of minds, or maybe minds that had certain types of training, might tune into the same frequency of consciousness. If multiple dreamers can walk the same paths, what creates those paths in the first place? Is it intention or training, or is it by design? This reminds me of another shared location, the Hill. So let's jump ahead a half century. A small independent podcast called the Telepathy Tapes begins interviewing families of non speaking autistic children who seem to communicate telepathically. Their stories are raw, unsettling, and strangely consistent. Some parents describe spontaneous exchanges of thought. Others recount joint dreams where the parent and child interact wordlessly, later confirming shared details. Over time, a pattern surfaced. Many of these children reference a recurring location, a grassy rise overlooking a river, or an open field beneath a pale light. Listeners started calling it the Hill. To the families, it's a neutral zone, the meeting place. The kids don't call it heaven or the astral plane, it's simply where they go when words won't work. If you play the accounts side by side, the Hill sounds like a distant cousin to Monroe's The Park. Both are natural settings, serene, structured, and populated by helpers who guide traffic between worlds. Both are accessed through altered states, one by trained projection, the other through innate telepathic connection, and both are remembered vividly as though the dream had a specific location in shared consciousness. When you lay those testimonies next to what's resurfacing in the gate community, students from across the country describing near identical mall dreamscapes, the symmetry is hard to ignore. In all three of these places, minds separated by miles or years seem to rendezvous somewhere that isn't supposed to even exist. Each of these places is a shared space, each has guides or watchers, and each seems to train something. If the park is a classroom for the soul and the hill is a playground for telepathic empathy, then Mall World could be the laboratory for conditioning, a man made echo of the same idea. It's tempting to see them as layers of one system, the spiritual, the innate, and the engineered. Monroe reached it by sound, the telepaths found it through silence, and gate kids might have been taught the route without knowing it consciously. What makes some people capable of that? In Monroe's system, it was practice, the deliberate calibration of brain waves using sound. In the telepathy tapes, it's just an innate sensitivity that bypasses language entirely. And in gate stories, it might be education itself. The exercises, the pattern recognition, the intense focus on abstract reasoning. But if you've been here, you probably believe that gate was more than that. Either it was a way to identify children who had the innate ability of OOBEs or astral travel already, or possibly a program designed, at least for some, to train children on this ability. For what purpose this would serve is anyone's guess. Could it have been to break the mind and reprogram it? Or could it have been to identify what children could be used as assets for psychic espionage? If the mind can be trained to perceive non physical space, then maybe those old programs were teaching navigation without explicitly stating the destination. Regardless, there are some things we know for scientific fact. Dreams can be guided by cues. Memory can be altered by sleep. Behavior can be changed by suggestion. That's the factual groundwork for this theory. Everything else, the notion that early gifted education programs doubled as quiet field tests for this technology, remains unverified, but has unquestionably eerie overlaps between the goals and timing of government sanctioned programs. This makes it plausible enough for the imagination to wander, and not very far either. If dreams can be steered and minds can be trained to cooperate inside them, then shared dreamscapes stop being some unknown mystical phenomenon. They become infrastructure, psychic meeting rooms built out of attention and repetition. Many of you who have suspected you experienced some sort of testing or conditioning during your time in Gate, whether you remember it or not, have reported the same things: repeated dreams of an empty mallscape, or perhaps a large maze of empty bathrooms or locker rooms. Perhaps you're one of the many who have had problems with dreams since childhood, whether it be night terrors, bizarre lucid dreams, dreaming you're floating or levitating, or sucked down strange pipes, vents, or tunnels. These dreams, especially when they started in childhood, can be quite terrifying and blur the distinct line between awake and asleep, confusing you and detaching your reality from your waking life. Everything in that mall is eerie, from the silence except for the hum to the weird skylights that don't seem natural. You recognize the layout before you turn each corner. It's both comfort and surveillance wrapped in the image of a shopping mall. For years, these dreams felt personal, quirky nostalgia from the collective subconscious, but then the Gate alumni started talking to each other. People who had never met described the same food court, the same hallways, even the same sinking feeling that something or someone was watching from behind the mirrored glass of a storefront window. To outsiders, it sounds like a coincidence, but to us, it feels like so much more. Maybe the GATE program was never just a support for academically advanced kids. Maybe it was a network. Special testing, separate classrooms, data collected and compared nationwide. Children labeled gifted were studied for how they learned, how they daydreamed, how they responded to stress. And somewhere in that overlap between study and experiment, mall world myth took root. The CIA's MK Ultra program officially closed in 1973 after congressional hearings exposed its dark underbelly: drugs, hypnosis, electrostimulation, sensory deprivation. But the research didn't vanish, it simply dispersed. Universities that had once taken MK Ultra funding kept open their labs under new grants: the Department of Education, the National Science Foundation, and private think tanks. Behavioral science pivoted from control to optimization. Again, the vocabulary changed, but not the end goal. So when GATE students describe their recurring mall world dreams as leftover programming, they're not talking about men in lab coats whispering code words. They mean the subtler conditioning: fluorescent classrooms, endless testing, the idea that their minds were being measured. If MK Ultra was the hardware experiment, then GATE became the software upgrade, the same obsession with control. But why a mall? Well, this could be for a few reasons. Think about what a mall represents: a controlled ecosystem, climate regulated, windowless, piped with music tuned to the average human heartbeat. It guides movement, controls pacing, and measures engagement. In the 1980s, those same principles shaped educational psychology: color, lighting, sound, reward schedules. And to dream of a mall is to dream of a perfectly managed environment. No clocks, no weather, just options upon options. Maybe Mall World isn't an accidental symbol. Maybe it's the mind replaying its earliest conditioning, the architecture of testing and observation rebuilt in REM. The more people trained under identical conditions, the more identical their subconscious set dressing becomes. But the uncanny part remains: persistence of the setting. Dreamers return to the same corridors years apart, sometimes meeting others who claim to have been there too. It's not proof of an external location, but it behaves like one. A shared dream, a shared memory, or psychic residue, take your pick. But maybe it's not nefarious. Maybe, just like all other dreams, malls are symbolic in their own way and share an imprint on society as a whole. Our subconscious speaks in metaphors, and a mall is a place that almost all of us have experienced in waking life. According to Google, dreaming of a shopping mall can symbolize choices, desires, and opportunities in life, reflecting a period of decision making regarding your finances, relationships, or career. It can also represent our need for social interaction or a desire for material possessions, and sometimes signifies feelings of emptiness or a search for meaning. Wow, Google, that was quite the run on sentence. The specific details of the dream, such as what you were buying or how you felt, can further provide clues about its meaning. It's a symbol of unlimited choice. Every storefront is a version of you. Psychologists say malls and dreams represent identity under construction, a place where the self shops for meaning. But it can also reveal exhaustion, too many options, or too little purpose. You walk in circles because you're searching for something that can't be purchased. But if you're like me, you might dream of being lost in a mall or lost in a strange maze of bathrooms like a giant locker room. Bathrooms and locker rooms appear when the unconscious needs privacy. They're thresholds, half public, half hidden, where we strip away what we show the world. In classical dream work, these rooms mean release, cleansing, or exposure. You might be purging what no longer belongs or afraid of being seen in that vulnerability. In the mall world reports, people mention long hallways leading to empty restrooms or locker room areas. Unions would call that a summons to the integration. The moment the dream asks you to face what's unguarded, to step out and meet your raw self before you re enter the crowd. Or maybe this relates to actual bathrooms as part of our conditioning. Don't forget the kids from the Presidio daycare said they were flushed down magic toilets. I don't know, but it's another strange overlap. The spaces people describe in mall world, echoing corridors, stairwells, parking decks, escalators to nowhere, belong to what some call liminal space, the architecture of the in between. This could be an airport at 3 a.m., schools after dark, empty food courts. They all share this eerie liminal feeling because it's not quite right for them to be so empty and isolated. Dreaming of liminal space often means the psyche is shifting states, aware of the transition. For GATE students who were possibly trained to live in between these categories, gifted yet isolated, it makes sense that their shared dream world would be neither home nor a classroom, but in the in between itself, a liminal space. For the record, I do have to say there's no evidence that GATE or any other school program practice covert dream manipulation. But again, no documents proving it doesn't erase the thousands of shared memories. The consistency of these accounts keeps the theory alive. Every few months, new threads appear, the same escalators, the same weird hum, and the same unspoken awareness that you are being watched and tested. Mall world functions as cultural truth. It tells us something about how it feels to be observed, tested on, and categorized from childhood onward. It's the dream of a generation raised inside systems that promised us freedom, but instead we were handed a seemingly unescapable world of consumerism, a nightmare mall. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Wicked Mysterious. If you did, don't forget to like and consider subscribing. Don't forget to grab my free ebook in the description box below and sign up for a discount on my upcoming conscious creation course. I will see you again soon and stay mysterious.